Hello and welcome to the next vlog in our 100 Men and Women of the Bible series. Today we're going to be focusing on a man who, in the book that we're following along with, is described as someone who we don't know much about, and that is the prophet Habakkuk. Now, if you want to read all about Habakkuk, you'll find him in, unsurprisingly, the book of Habakkuk. And it isn't a particularly long book, and it's actually only 3 chapters long, and it's definitely worth a read. But to some extent, for lack of a better word, I think it's a bit of a peculiar book to read, because it's probably one of the most impersonal but personal accounts of someone's relationship with God. And let me explain what I mean by that. And to do that, we need a bit of context of at what time Habakkuk is writing. So Habakkuk is writing from Judea, where he lived, which was under the threat from Babylonians. So what we have in these chapters is Habakkuk crying out at God, asking him where he is whilst they're being threatened with violence, which is then followed by God's response, which is then followed by a prayer from Habakkuk. So what we get to read is something that is so personal. We get to read something that is so real, because we get to see this real, almost intimate moment with God, with only knowing that this person is called Habakkuk and is a prophet. It's almost like reading somebody's diary, but not knowing who they are. But it is the personal nature of these writings that I think makes them so special. It adds this real, genuine nature, in my opinion. And I think that there is so much to unpack and learn from Habakkuk and his relationship with God, and to go through each chapter, which I very easily could, I think, because I think there's so much we could learn from him. Might take a little bit too long for today's vlog. But I think we can learn a lot from Habakkuk if we see his writings, his books, his narrative as a set of traffic lights. Now, bear with me because it should make sense as we go, she says, hopefully. Firstly, we have the red light, the stopping, the halting, the do not go. This was a game of Monopoly. You'd be told, do not pass go, do not collect £200. And that's what I think we have in the first 2 chapters. We read of Habakkuk turning to God and go, where are you in these troubled times, Lord? Verse 2 of chapter 1 says, how long, Lord, must I have to call for help, but you do not listen? Or cry to you violence, but you do not save. There's this barrier, which means Habakkuk cannot go anywhere. He's under attack. But what does he do in that moment? And I think this is what is key. He shouts out to God. He cries out to God. He's a great example of someone who may have felt lost, felt abandoned, who feels alone. So what does he do? He cries out. And what happens next? God responds. God responds and says in verse 5, look at the nations and watch and be utterly amazed. For I am going to do something in your days that you would not believe, even if you were told. We have a God who hears the cries of his people. He hears when we shout to him for help, and he responds in ways that we would not believe even if we were told. How awesome is that? So prepare to be utterly amazed, I think. So moving on from the red light onto the amber light, when we have that moment, that idea of being ready, but still having to stop for that small pause. I'm sure those of us who drive have had that moment when we're waiting for that green light. We've got the hand over the handbrake, ready to drop it, your foot over your acceleration, ready to go. But before we go, before we drop the handbrake and speed off, we have that moment of preparation. And I think that's what we see in Habakkuk's prayer in chapter 3. We have this moment that before he does anything, he too prepares. He says in verse 1, Lord, I have heard of your fame. I stand in awe of your deeds, Lord. Habakkuk takes a moment of preparation to just stand in awe of all that God has done, and he prays. And actually, from this moment of preparation, Habakkuk seems to witness it and experience the glory of God. Habakkuk records of it when he says in verses 3 and 4, his glory covered the heavens and his praise filled the earth. His splendour was like the sunrise. Rays flashed from his hand where his power was hidden. Habakkuk takes a moment to be ready to go, but takes a moment to prepare, to pray to God and to encounter him face to face. I wonder how often in our preparations for each day we take that moment where we're ready to go, maybe shoes on feet, keys in hand, but we then just stop to be with God, to allow that time to meet with him face to face. I wonder what difference doing that might make to your day. And finally, we have the green light, we have the go. Habakkuk has stopped, he's turned to God, he's asked for help, and he's met with him, so finally he can go. He's off, and he can go anywhere. But where does he go? Well, I think that's the less important factor in this. What I think is important is not where he goes, but how he goes. And it tells us in verse 19 of chapter 3 that the sovereign Lord is my strength. He makes my feet like the feet of deer. He enables me to tread on the heights. Habakkuk goes out in the strength of the Lord. He is with him. Habakkuk is walking close to God. And because of this, he can tread on the heights. He can achieve anything. And do you know what the awesome thing is? So can we. We can go in this same strength, tread these same heights. And all we have to do is choose to go out in the strength of the Lord. So today, I think we should be more Habakkuk. We should be ready to stop at those barriers and shout to God for help, because he will help. We should prepare ourselves to meet with God, and we will meet with God. And we should go out in the strength of the Lord, because he will be with us. So today, let's be more Habakkuk.